My boss hires for fun. Intern mocked me in front of everyone for crying after hours. Months later, the discovery sparked further investigation. Multiple reports. I was publicly humiliated by a young intern at my job after staying late and crying at my desk. She and others laughed at me, and our boss, who had a habit of hiring certain types of interns, did nothing. Later, I accidentally discovered something in his office that led to a bigger investigation and ultimately changed the course of my job and personal life. I mean, she was literally crying, Bryn laughed, tapping her long nails on the break room table. At her desk. At like 9 p.m. Isn't that kind of sad? I was in the hallway outside, about to refill my tea. I froze. Ryan chuckled. Yeah, it was like something out of a movie. One of those old lady office breakdown scenes. She didn't even hear us, Bryn added, amused. I backed away. Quietly. I never got the tea. I never wanted to be the woman crying at her desk, not at this point in life. But grief doesn't care if you're at work, or in your car, or in the cereal aisle. That night, I had just finished a painful phone call with my daughter. She had forgotten my birthday. Again. She was 17, and living with her dad after the divorce. I told myself it was just a teenage thing, that it didn't mean anything. But the truth was harder to swallow. When I broke down at my desk, I thought I was alone. I stayed after hours for Franklin again, my boss who loved last-minute pressure and lived for the performance of leadership but lacked the follow-through. He wanted a pitch deck polished, then repolished, and then reimagined, all before Monday. I thought staying late showed commitment. But in hindsight, it made me a perfect target. Bryn had been at the company for about a month when that happened. She wasn't listed as a regular intern, no profile in the directory, no official title. She wore designer handbags and didn't even bother pretending to work. She was always hovering near Franklin's office or in the kitchen, charming someone. Most of us thought she was just another one of Franklin's projects. He had a thing for young women with vague titles and unexplained privileges. Nobody said anything. In offices like ours, silence is currency. After overhearing their conversation, I didn't confront them. I couldn't. I knew how it would go. They'd deny it, or laugh it off. HR didn't really exist for people like me. I was a solid worker. The one who trained interns, edited everyone's work, stayed late. But I was also the woman people stopped inviting to happy hours. Instead, I buried myself in work. I tried to ignore the whispering that followed me into meetings, or the way Bryn sometimes looked at me like I was beneath her. Like I was taking up space she wanted to stretch into. But something in me changed after that. I stopped being just tired. I got angry. Quietly, strategically angry. I began to document things, not in a sneaky way, but methodically. I kept a journal in my locked drawer. Times Bryn arrived, who she sat with, how long she was in Franklin's office with the door closed. Notes about odd interactions, things that didn't sit right. It started as a form of emotional processing, but it quickly became something else. A pattern was forming. Franklin never reprimanded Bryn, even when she made snide remarks in meetings or failed to deliver anything of value. Other interns, who worked hard, got dismissed after 3 months, but she kept floating around like a pet project. One morning, Franklin was out on a business trip and his assistant asked me to grab a file for a presentation. His door was unlocked. I didn't think twice. But when I opened the desk drawer, looking for a USB stick, I found a manila folder labeled, Non-Retained Intern Profiles. I should have left it alone. I know that. But curiosity, resentment, and months of humiliation made my hand move faster than my brain. Inside were glossy printouts. Pictures of interns, past and present. Along with personal notes. Not professional feedback. Personal notes. Things like, high social appeal. Low skill, but pleasant distraction. Keep morale. Distracts Marta's mood. Not promotion material. Works hard but emotionally brittle. It was my name. Just like that. Emotionally brittle. A burden to be managed. I felt sick. And then, the most telling note, scribbled under Bryn's profile: potential leverage. Social media reach, good optics, no HR exposure. That night, I didn't sleep. I emailed a scanned copy of the folder to my personal email. I told myself it was just to protect myself. I didn't know what I'd do with it. I just knew I couldn't unknow what I saw. Over the following weeks, I noticed more. A senior copywriter confided in me over lunch, saying Bryn had once implied she'd get her fired. A junior assistant said she walked into Franklin's office once and found them standing suspiciously close, too close. But nothing concrete. Just whispers. Always whispers. Then, out of nowhere, I got a message on LinkedIn. It was from Delia, a former intern from 2 years ago. She had liked one of my comments on a leadership article and reached out to say she remembered me being one of the kind ones. I thanked her, and we chatted. Small talk turned personal. She admitted that Franklin had made her uncomfortable, promised her a job, and then ghosted her. She mentioned Bryn by name, said she reminded her of the others. I asked what others. She told me there were 4 more. We started connecting dots. Delia and I agreed to talk off-platform. We exchanged numbers, and that night, for the first time in a long time, I sat in my kitchen with a notebook, pen in hand, listening while someone else, someone younger, but with eerily similar experiences, talked about how Franklin had promised her mentorship and then pulled the rug out from under her the moment she expressed discomfort at how personal their conversations had become. He said I wasn't a team fit, she told me. But he had no feedback, no actual examples. Just said it wasn't working. After I asked him to stop texting me outside work hours. That call lit a match. Over the next few weeks, Delia helped connect me with 3 other former interns who shared their own quiet exits, each ending the same way: admiration, inappropriate attention, discomfort, dismissal. All centered around Franklin. All followed by glowing social media posts from the company about opportunity and fresh perspectives. One woman, Zara, told me she had reported her experience to HR and never received a follow-up. Another, Anika, said she saw Franklin delete an email in front of her that she had just sent about a concern with another team member. He smiled when he did it, she said. Like I was stupid for trying. I was collecting puzzle pieces. Still unsure what picture they formed, but knowing it wasn't abstract anymore. This wasn't just about Bryn mocking me for crying or Franklin underestimating me. This was a pattern of control, performance, and manipulation that spanned years. I wanted to report it. I also didn't want to lose my job. So I waited. In the meantime, things at home weren't much easier. Callie was still distant, mostly cold through texts, and refused my dinner invites. Alan wasn't helping. He had started traveling more with his girlfriend, leaving Callie alone often. When she needed something, she came to me. When she didn't, I was invisible. I used to think love meant being always available. Now I wasn't sure what it meant at all. Still, I tried. I left meals in the fridge she could microwave. I texted her encouragement before big tests. I didn't push. I waited for her to. At work, a shift began. Franklin stopped acknowledging me. Bryn's presence started to fade, first from meetings, then from the office entirely. Rumors said she was working remotely on a special campaign, but there was no campaign. Her Instagram told another story: beach selfies, brunches, and influencer-esque captions. I decided it was time. I reached out to corporate HR, this time, not anonymously. I shared what I had. The scans, the emails, the connections to former interns. I didn't frame it as revenge. I presented it as a concern about a systemic pattern and potential risk to the company. I was careful, deliberate. Every sentence is thought out. No emotion, just facts. It took a week before I got a response. An HR executive from New York wanted to set up a video call. Then things moved fast. Within 2 weeks, a corporate audit team was on site. No warning, just suits in the lobby on a Monday morning, asking for interviews, reviewing files, closing doors. Franklin looked pale when he saw them. Not angry. Pale. Bryn's desk was cleared out quietly. A few people were called into conference rooms. I was one of them. My interview lasted over 2 hours. I gave them everything. All the notes. All the contact information from the former interns who agreed to speak. The room was cold, quiet. The man across from me barely blinked. The woman beside him took constant notes. By the end of that week, Franklin was on leave. By the end of the next, an internal memo went out, leadership changes effective immediately. There was no farewell. No explanation. Just silence, like a storm had passed and left everything wet and broken. In the following days, coworkers came to my desk. Quietly, in passing. I always knew something was off. Thanks for saying something. You were brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt tired. They promoted me, quietly, without ceremony. I now oversaw the entire department. My office had a window. My badge had a new title. No one mocked me anymore. They listened. Still, I didn't smile much. Not yet. It wasn't joy I felt, it was released. A long-held breath finally exhaled. At home, Callie came home crying one night. She had a fight with her dad's girlfriend, something about boundaries, or a new rule, or maybe just a teenager having a teenage moment. She asked if she could stay with me for a few days. I said yes before she finished the sentence. She slept in her old room. I made pancakes the next morning. She didn't eat much but sat at the table the whole time. That was enough for me. Later that evening, she asked if I was happy. I didn't know how to answer that. I said I was okay. That I was learning. She nodded. You seem different, she said. Is it different? She shrugged, but smiled. I don't know yet. I laughed. Fair. Callie didn't go back to her dad's that week. She stayed. At first, it was quiet. She came and went, headphones always in, doors half shut. I didn't push. I just made sure there was food in the fridge, milk for her cereal, and a few of her favorite snacks in the pantry, gummy bears, those ridiculously expensive spicy chips, and almond milk she insisted on using despite never finishing the carton. A few nights in, I came home to the smell of popcorn and saw her sitting on the couch. Netflix paused on one of the baking shows she used to love as a kid. She looked up, slightly embarrassed, then patted the seat next to her. That moment, so small and ordinary, felt like someone loosening a knot inside me I didn't realize had gotten so tight. She didn't ask about my job, and I didn't volunteer the story. Part of me didn't want to be that mom, venting about workplace drama like it was high school. But more than that, I think I needed to keep that victory quiet for now. Like a wound still fresh from surgery, not ready for sunlight. At the office, things changed in ways both obvious and subtle. First, there were fewer whispers. Fewer tight-lipped glances between coworkers when someone said something inappropriate. HR held mandatory ethics training, yes, the kind people usually roll their eyes at, but this one felt different. The examples they used? They were familiar. Too familiar. I sat through it silently, watching younger employees scribble notes while a few older ones exchanged knowing looks with me. No one mentioned Franklin by name. But he was everywhere. In the pauses. In this way people suddenly second-guess their jokes. In the extra effort managers made to actually engage with their teams. Bryn was gone. Vanished. Her desk remained empty for a week before someone finally removed her chair and cleared out the leftover lip balm and crumpled tissue under her monitor. Her name never came up again, not in any meeting, not in the break room. I did hear, through someone in accounting, that she'd been offered a settlement to avoid further involvement. The word NDA floated around like smoke, curling into people's sentences, never landing directly. I didn't want to know the details. I didn't want revenge. I just didn't want her, or anyone like her, back. I started mentoring a few of the newer hires. A young woman named Nora in data analytics reminded me of myself at that age, smart, nervous, overly polite. She knocked before entering open offices, apologized before making suggestions. I pulled her aside one day and told her something no one had told me: stop asking for permission to take up space. Her eyes welled with tears. That broke me a little. After that, she started sitting straighter in meetings. Started making bolder proposals. Sometimes I caught her glancing over at me after presenting something, like looking for approval. I always nodded. It felt good to lift someone else. After so many years of feeling like I was always being pushed down. One Thursday night, Callie came home late. She dropped her bag by the door and came into the kitchen where I was heating leftovers. "You really stood up to that guy at work, didn't you?" she said out of nowhere. I looked up from the microwave. "Who told you that?" "I saw your name on Reddit," she said, grinning. "Someone said a brave senior employee exposed a toxic boss and saved the intern program. You didn't name names, but it was you, wasn't it?" I hesitated. Then nodded. She opened the fridge, pulled out the almond milk, then looked back at me. "That's kind of badass." I laughed, because there was no other response. The microwave beeped, but I didn't move. She poured the milk and leaned on the counter. "I know I've been a pain," she said. "With the divorce, and dad stuff, and everything. I didn't know how to be around you. I thought, maybe you didn't want me here." My throat tightened. "I always want you here." "I know," she said. "I just had to feel it." "Don't hear it." We didn't say much more after that. But something shifted. A layer peeled back. A kind of understanding settled between us like dust on sunlight. Back at work, I kept my head down, even with the promotion. I wasn't interested in being the face of a movement. I didn't need applause. What I wanted was stability, peace, and maybe the occasional afternoon without passive-aggressive emails. But the department changed. More women were hired in senior roles. The intern program was restructured, supervised, formalized. We no longer took walk-in recommendations from senior leadership. Every applicant was vetted through HR and legal. The unspoken rules of our culture, the ones that protected people like Franklin, were no longer unspoken. They were written out, challenged, rewritten. Not perfectly, but persistently. And people started coming to me, not with gossip, but with concerns. With questions. Like I had become some kind of lighthouse they trusted when things got murky. It was humbling. Strange. Healing. Alan showed up at my door 2 weekends later. He looked different. Not older exactly, but worn. As if life hadn't given him quite the return he'd expected. He held a grocery bag, wine, a box of pastries from that overpriced bakery downtown, and a face that tried to pretend this was just a casual visit. Callie was out with friends. I hadn't seen him in nearly a year. "I won't stay long," he said, stepping inside without really waiting for an answer. "I just wanted to talk." He settled at the kitchen island, like he used to when this was still his home. I didn't offer coffee. I leaned against the fridge and waited. "She told me she's staying here longer," he said. I didn't know things were that tense. "She didn't say much." "She didn't have to." He nodded slowly. "Sabrina and Callie don't get along." "Never really did. But it's getting worse." I kept quiet. I had no intention of playing therapist between him and his new girlfriend. "She misses you," he said after a beat. "She talks about you all the time. Even when she's mad." That almost broke me. "Alan," I said, voice low, steady, "you left. And then you acted like you didn't." He looked down, picked at the corner of the pastry box. "I thought I was choosing something easier." Easier doesn't always mean better. He sighed. You were always better at seeing the long game. We didn't rehash everything. That ship had sunk long ago. But for the first time since the divorce, we sat in the same room without defensiveness. Without scorekeeping. It wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a truce. Before he left, he stopped at the door and glanced back. You look stronger. Not stronger, I said. Just done pretending I'm not tired. He smiled, small and almost sad. I get that. And then he was gone again. The next few weeks felt like someone had adjusted the color settings in my life. Things weren't perfect, but they were sharper. Work was manageable. I had a team now that collaborated instead of competing. Nora brought me a coffee one morning and said, I pitched your advice to someone else today. When I asked what she meant, she replied, take up space. I felt it deep in my chest. That ripple. I started walking home some nights instead of taking the bus. It was spring in Chicago, and the streets had that wet concrete smell mixed with fresh blooms from sidewalk planters. I'd pass the lake on my way, just for a moment, and think about how far I'd come since last year. Not just professionally, but personally. I wasn't the same woman who cried alone at her desk. I wasn't the woman who whispered instead of speaking up. Callie and I started to build new traditions, without trying to recreate old ones. Sunday takeout. Morning walks when she wasn't swamped with homework. We went to a second-hand bookstore and spent an hour just wandering, not talking. She picked up a worn copy of The Bell Jar and asked if I'd read it. Twice, I told her. She nodded, tucked it under her arm, and said, I want to understand things like you do. That one sentence echoed in me for days. Then, out of nowhere, I got an email from someone in the legal department. They were conducting a follow-up on the investigation, and asked if I'd be willing to provide further information, confidentially, for a potential external review. Apparently, the scope of what had happened with Franklin was bigger than expected. Much bigger. I hesitated. I thought we were done. I thought my role had ended. But when I opened the document they attached, pages of redacted internal notes, interview transcripts, even performance review discrepancies, I realized how many people had been affected. There were names I recognized. Some I hadn't spoken to in years. Some had been gone long before Bryn ever showed up. This wasn't just about me anymore. I agreed to meet with them. Not because I needed to stir things up again, but because something about accountability, true, lasting accountability, suddenly felt worth it. That meeting would change everything again. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in a neutral off-site location, not in the office, not over Zoom. A hotel conference room on the north side of the city, windowless and sterile. Legal reps from corporate, 2 compliance officers, and an external investigator were there. The moment I stepped into the room, I could tell it was more than just protocol. They weren't just crossing T's and dotting I's, they were building a case. I wasn't the only one they were talking to. They had spreadsheets, time logs, HR notes dating back years. Apparently, someone in another department had filed a formal complaint that echoed many of the same issues I'd raised months ago. My report had triggered the internal review, but now the company was facing the reality that Franklin's misconduct had been quietly damaging people for nearly a decade. I didn't hold anything back. I gave them names of former interns and staffers who had privately messaged me but hadn't been comfortable coming forward. I shared the copied folder, again. I even showed them screenshots from Bryn's Instagram, highlighting posts that suggested a deeper relationship with Franklin during her so-called internship. When the external investigator asked what I wanted out of this process, I paused. I thought about it. I really did. I don't want to see another girl mocked in the hallway for having emotions, I said. I don't want hardworking people passed over so some intern with high heels and a flirty laugh can sit in a glass office and call it experience. He nodded, scribbled something down. That's fair. A week later, I received an email with a confidentiality clause and a non-disclosure agreement. The company was settling, not with me personally, but with several of the employees involved in the complaints. Franklin's severance had been revoked, and a clause had been added to his record that would follow him to any future employer in the industry. And then, the cherry on top, an official company memo. It landed in every inbox. Effective immediately, Garnett and Boyd is restructuring its leadership framework to reflect our commitment to ethical workplace culture and inclusive hiring. In alignment with these efforts, we are proud to announce a new division for mentorship and equity, led by Marta Ellison, Senior Director of Communications and Development. That name, my name, was bolded. I sat back in my chair, rereading the message 3 times. I didn't cry. They gave me the freedom to design the new program from scratch. It was real, not just fluff for the website. We recruited mentors from across departments, created onboarding guides that were trauma-informed, and implemented anonymous feedback channels that actually got read. Former interns reached out. Some returned as consultants. Some just sent thank you messages. One of them, Zara, even started working full-time with us again. I hired her myself. The office culture? It transformed. Not overnight, not perfectly, but it grew up. The glittery favoritism faded. People got promoted based on skill. We started hiring more women over 30. People stopped whispering. The glass walls stayed. But now they reflected something better. Callie stayed. At first, it was a temporary arrangement. But the more we talked, the more she let her walls down, the more I realized she needed me just as much as I needed her. She started asking about the past, not with resentment, but with curiosity. Why did you stay with Dad so long? Did you ever want to leave your job? Were you scared? I answered everything honestly. One night, she asked, "Are you happy now?" It caught me off guard. I took a moment. I think I'm proud. And I think that's close. She nodded. That's better than most people. I ran into Bryn again, months later. It was at a downtown coffee shop. She looked different. Less confident. The phone she used to live on was sitting face down. No entourage. No Franklin. She recognized me and stiffened. I walked past her, ordered my drink, and turned to leave. But then I looked back. "Hey," I said, just loud enough for her to hear. She looked up. "I hope you find work you're actually good at," I said. "And people who won't protect you when you're not." I didn't wait for a response. That was enough. My final act of quiet revenge came during the company's end-of-year awards. They asked me to present the first Ethical Leadership in Practice award, an ironic twist, considering where the company had been a year ago. I walked to the stage in front of the entire staff. My name was introduced with a long string of accomplishments I never asked to be recognized for. When I took the microphone, I looked at the sea of faces, some familiar, some new. I used to believe that working hard would protect me, I said. But I've learned that speaking up, when it's hardest, is what really builds your legacy. And they clapped. Not politely. Not because they had to. Because they meant it. Franklin never resurfaced in the industry. Word got around, and quietly, he became unhireable in any serious firm. A mutual connection said he had started consulting for a startup no one had heard of. Good. Let him start over. Let him see how it feels. As for me, I didn't rise to the top in a blaze of glory. I didn't become famous. I didn't get a book deal or a podcast. But I got respect. I got my daughter back. I got my name back from someone else's folder. And I got peace,